Welcome to today's edition, which is the one for the month of March, and we are already ready. The presenter is here, Nimaye Digi. I hope I pronounced her name well. We've spoken multiple times, but I never asked for the right pronunciation. But I know she sometimes put Nemo in bracket to make it easier for those of us who might not be able to call our name properly. So today's session, again, the agenda is always structured to focus around the presentation itself so that I'm going to get out of the way very soon. But at the end, there will be Q&A, and we are not super strict about, sticking to time with the Q&A. If you have questions, put them there. If the presenter is able to squeeze out additional minutes to answer your questions, then that's good luck to all of us. Otherwise, she's already said, you can reach to her on social media. Maybe I'll share her LinkedIn so that, if you want to connect and be in loop of what she posts. So I'll be doing this part and I'll be done with that part shortly. And she will take over the presentation till the end and I'll wrap up at the end. Like I have mentioned, we are now on multiple platforms. So I will share this again in the chat. I encourage us all to join the Slack because I feel that's where we can keep the communication going. You can even give us more inputs. I feel like the Slack community communication platform makes it, a lot more collaborative and we learn from one another. And like I mentioned, today we've got Nimaya as our special presenter, and she's going to be taking us on something a bit different from how our last four sessions have been. So this is a lot more focused on strategy, having the right framework, and I was able to get a peek into what she wants to share. So I won't want to deny you, the joy of getting, even for me, I want to really understand how to apply those frameworks she's going to share with us. So I'm going to get out of our way and then hand it over to her so that she can start our presentation now. So over to you, Nimai. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I really appreciate you all being here. Let me start sharing my screen. So, I'm Nirmai, but as Michael said, everyone calls me Nemo. Yes, like the fish. Before you ask, yes, I've been found and I am right here. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about something that is on every single leadership agenda right now, AI. But not just AI, how can you actually use AI in organizations? How can you use AI the right way, meaning it gives you a significant amount of ROI? So, we're going to do some things a little different today. I'm going to take you through the journey, the hype, the failure, the layoffs, the hard lessons. And then I'm going to show you a framework that actually works. How can you bring AI into your organizations? And in the next 50 minute or so, I want you walking out with a clear answer to one question. What does my organization actually need to do to make AI work? Okay, let's go for it. But before that, just a quick introduction. I am a data and AI strategist. I'm an associate director of business intelligence at InsurTech. Uh, I specialize in bridging business and technology together, meaning I work with both teams. I'm sort of the bridge between them. I drive AI initiatives. I drive AI initiatives that are needed for the business, that are needed for my stakeholders. And I create, implement, and design a data strategy where AI is the byproduct of it. But outside of work, I'm also involved in community leadership. I am a huge girls in tech advocate. I'm a mentor at Women in Agile. I am also a member of Project Management Institute of Buffalo. Okay, that was pretty much about me. So let's get into it. Let's talk about, well, not AI. Let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to 1960s when the math teachers actually took it to the streets. And the protest was not even about curriculum or pay. It was about a new tool that had just arrived, the calculator. Teachers were convinced that if students use calculators, they'd forget basic math. So they fought. They fought loudly, passionately, because they believed they were protecting learning itself. Meanwhile, let's be honest, most of us still use our phones just to do 7 multiplied by 8, and we turned out fine. But jokes aside, calculators didn't destroy math, they made it faster. That speed opened the door to new fields: statistics, data science, machine learning, neural networks, and eventually AI itself. History shows that we have always hesitated when something new shows up. We worry about what we might lose before we see what we might actually gain out of it. And yet, every single time, we adapt. Don't believe it? Let's rewind even further, all the way back to 19th century England. For generations, entire communities depended on weaving and knitting. It wasn't just a trade for them, right? It was their identity. The loom wasn't a piece of equipment in the corner of a factory. It was the heartbeat of homes and towns across England. Families passed down weaving skills from parent to child. Entire economies ran on fabric, thread by thread, loom by loom. And overnight came something new: the automated loom and the stocking frame. Machines that could weave faster, work longer hours, and didn't need years of training. They could produce more in a day than a skilled artisan might in a week. Now, to the workers, this did not look like progress. It looked like threat. They feared that their craft would become worthless, their wages would collapse, and the future would be handed to the machines. And remember, this was 200 years ago. So people fought back, not with petitions and hashtags, but with actual hammers. They smashed the machines and world called them Luddites. But here's the irony: the machines survived, and so did the people. The industry evolved because new jobs appeared to operate, repair, and supervise these machines. And that created more space for other things because others now moved into design, pattern making, or fabric trading. So, what looked like the end of life became the beginning of a new one. So, what does history tell us? History tells us that we respond almost identically when something new comes up. First fear, then resistance, and then finally acceptance. And here's the thing: this change doesn't have to be a massive new technology disrupting your industry. Change can be starting a job, it can certainly be managing a new team, or let's be honest, showing up at Trader Joe's and realizing they have discontinued everything bagel seasoning, right? So that's the human side of transformation. It was in year 1969 when psychiatrist Elizabeth Ross first mapped this emotional journey, creating what we now call the change transition curve. And a lot of companies use this emotional curve to adapt to any new technology, whether it's new AI tool at work or honestly a new cereal at breakfast. The curve is the same. We start in shock or denial, dip into frustration. However, we start experimenting with it a little, and eventually it becomes normal because we integrate it in our routine. It becomes normal. You learn to coexist with this technology or coexist with that change. Now, how does that relate to AI, right? Because when we keep talking about AI, I ask my stakeholders, hey, when do you think you got access to AI? And a lot of folks tell me 2022, 2023 with GPT. Yes, but is that really the time when AI suddenly arrived? It's not. Because we keep saying AI, but most times what we are talking about is generative AI, the kind that creates text, code, or images. But here's the truth: AI did not start with GPT, it has been quietly powering our world for decades. Don't believe me? I'm going to give you an example closer to home. I'm based at Buffalo. So I found a university at Buffalo case study. This was in 1997. University of Buffalo researchers built something incredible for the US Postal Service, a system that could actually read handwritten addresses on envelopes. Think about it: a machine reading messy handwriting, sorting millions of letters automatically in the 90s, when the computers were much, much, much slower. It's just that it wasn't called AI back then, it was automation or innovation. This system ended up saving millions of dollars in labor cost, and it was later used by Australia Post and UK's Royal Mail too. But here's the part I love about it. I check statistics. Did this system take over jobs? Did folks lose job overnight? No, because this system now needed to be built, maintained, repaired. So it actually created more jobs. And it also solidified the whole argument that AI has been here all along. It just had different names, right? Because think about it: AI has been quietly working in the background, sorting your mail, flagging fraud on your credit card, suggesting the next Netflix movie, powering your Google search, helping your phone autocorrect your mistakes, mine especially. But none of that felt like AI. The only difference now is, for the first time in the history, we are all interacting with it. GPT, Gemini, Codex, Claude, you have an interface where you directly interact with it. Anyone in this room can open up any of their AI chatbot, talk to it, create with it, even argue with it sometimes. Yeah. But this accessibility is what changed everything. AI didn't appear overnight, it just stepped out of shadows and into our hand. AI is no longer a technical, folks only thing, it's available to everyone. So, why? Why does this feel so different, right? Because if we step back, the pattern is actually very familiar. We saw fear of new tools, right? We saw calculators, we saw looms. We have seen anxiety about job disruption before. We have seen resistance before. What makes this moment different is not that the pattern is new, it's the scale, the speed, and the pressure. This time, the tool is visible to everyone. Executives are talking about it, board members are talking about it, employees are experimenting with it, vendors are pushing for it, and investors are rewarding it. So organizations are not just curious about AI, they feel pressured to move and use AI. And that's what brings us to the next part of the presentation. Because if history gives us the human pattern, the market gives us the business context. And right now, the context is simple. We are in an AI gold rush. Yes, you heard me right. We are in an AI gold rush. Because every boardroom, every executive team, every strategy conversation seems to be circling around the same message: move on AI or risk being left behind. And when you look at the numbers, the urgency makes sense. More than $300 billion are invested in AI globally in 2023 alone. 75% of companies are already exploring or actively using AI. And by 2030, the projected market value is expected to reach $2.3 Trillion. So this is not fringe trend, right? This is not experimentation happening on the sidelines. This is a full-scale business shift. But here's the catch. When this much money, attention, and expectations rush into one space, organizations start reacting fast, sometimes maybe too fast. They launch pilots before defining the business problem. They buy tools before building capability. They talk about transformation before they are ready to operationalize it. So, yes, the opportunity is real, the momentum is real, and so is the pressure. And naturally, that brings us to the next question. Who's driving this rush exactly? Because this momentum did not come out of nowhere. Well, it's being fueled by the biggest players in the market because they are placing very high bets on AI right now. And I'd like to show you that stats because I know we talked about, hey, why the AI rush, right? Like everyone's investing in it, but let's actually talk about who is driving it. Let's talk about these big six because momentum didn't come out of nowhere. It's been driven by some of the biggest companies in the world, and each of them have made it very clear that AI is no longer a side bet. It's a core strategic priority. Microsoft moved early aggressively with more than 13 billion invested in OpenAI and Copilot built across its product. Amazon, major player through Anthropic while also expanding Bedrock and its broader AI services through AWS. Google responded with its own push through Gemini Notebook LLM, making sure it stays central to how people interact with AI. And I'll be honest, Gemini, I've been using a lot of Gemini. I find myself bouncing between multiple tools, sometimes Claude, sometimes Gemini, sometimes GPT. But the pace at which these tools are growing, every big company is trying to push out its own AI just to have users still continue that. Remember, GPT came out and everyone was like, yeah, I'm not going to do Google search anymore. I'm going to use GPT. Then came Gemini. Then came Gemini's extended full feature of you can use Gemini for presentations, but it also edits and saves it into your Google Drive, in your Google Slides, right? Meta, fourth one, investing at massive scale. With growing AI capital expenditures and products like Llama, Meta AI becoming central to its strategy. Salesforce, CRM player, right? It's building AI directly into business workflows through Einstein and Agentforce, pushing the idea of autonomous enterprise agents. Finally, IBM continued to evolve its enterprise AI position, moving from Watson to Watson X, with a stronger focus on AI at scale. So when you step back and take a look at this, the message is pretty clear. The question was never really whether the companies would adopt AI. The real question has been how, and how soon are you adopting it? So let's look at a reality checkpoint, shall we? Because despite all of this momentum, most AI initiatives aren't actually working. And this is where the conversation starts to shift. Because it's one thing to talk about investment, excitement, and market potential, but it's completely another thing to turn that expectations into results. Because more than half of AI models never really make it into production. 9 out of 10 times companies say their AI projects have been under delivered. IBM Watson Health alone resulted in more than around $4 billion in write offs. So the gap between AI ambition and AI delivery is massive. Organizations are not struggling because they lack interest. Clearly, they don't. They're investing a lot, right? They are not struggling because they have lack of access to tools. They are struggling because they are trying to move from hype to execution. without the right foundation. And that's the part that gets missed. AI failure doesn't usually start with the model. It starts much early with unclear business problem, weak data readiness, low stakeholder buy-in. I would say low to none, no stakeholder buy-in, and without the right foundation. So, before we talk about what works, we need to be honest about what's going wrong. Because these failures are not isolated incidents, they are patterns. And I have a few examples that I want to show you guys. So, I have IBM Watson Health, Zillow, Amazon, and Air Canada. All these examples are failed AI initiatives. But when you look deeper into it, all of them reveal the same underlying issue. That is, organizations rushed into AI without the right guardrails. Take IBM Watson Health, for example. It was positioned as something that could transform cancer treatments. But in reality, that didn't match the promise. Doctors raised concern about the quality and safety of its recommendation, and eventually the business was sold off after billions in write downs. The second one, Amazon hiring AI. An interesting one because on paper it was really efficient. So Amazon wanted to use AI to screen resumes at scale. Totally understandable, right? They get what, like thousands of resumes every month or something. But what they did was they had their model and they gave all of their past hiring data, past resumes that they have selected, and past resumes that it did not select to this model. Now, technology has always been a male dominated field where only 23 to 28% of women are involved in this space. So naturally, folks who were selected were more male and less female. Now, the model learned on this historical bias. It learned to penalize women. And that's why the system had to be scrapped entirely. And I think it led to massive layoffs. I'm trying to remember the number, but yeah. And then there's Zillow. Again, a very interesting one. Zillow wanted to flip houses using AI at scale. Brilliant idea. They started launching this idea in 2019. However, 2020, something happened that none of us predicted. No model could ever predict that, which was pandemic. And now this model did not take into account the current market shift because folks who were staying in a city near the office were now remote. They decided to move, and their model did not account for this market shift. There were no feedbacks in place, so the model couldn't adapt fast enough. And the company ended up taking massive losses and laying off employees. And finally, we have Air Canada. Shows us a whole different kind of risk. Their chatbot gave a customer incorrect information about the bereavement fears, and the company was held liable. And this wasn't just one, there were multiple incidents. So this wasn't a technical mistake, it was a governance failure. So when AI goes wrong, it doesn't usually go wrong one way. Sometimes it's bad data, sometimes it's bias, sometimes it's lack of monitoring, or sometimes it's weak governance. But the pattern is the same. The technology moved faster than the organization's ability to manage it. So, this leads to a whole another consequence we don't talk about enough, the layoff paradox. Because at the same time, companies were pouring billions into AI. Many of them were also cutting thousands of jobs. Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Chegg, different companies, but same pattern. The justification was often about efficiency, reinvestment, or focusing on strategic priorities. And in many cases, AI was the part of that story. But here's the irony. In a lot of these cases, the AI investments weren't actually delivering the kind of value that justified the disruption. Chegg is one of the clearest examples. GPT disrupted its tutoring model, and the company lost a huge amount of market value, and it had to cut the very people it was trying to replace. IBM made a similar bet, paused hirings for role, expected them to be replaced by AI. But not long after, Watson Health was sold off at a loss. So the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Move fast, fund AI, cut people, and then realize the strategy wasn't mature enough. And that's why this conversation cannot be about technology. It has to be about sequencing, readiness, and responsibility. Because when companies skip strategy, people end up paying the price. So, by this point, the pattern has become pretty clear. AI initiatives don't fail because algorithm wasn't smart enough. They fail because the organization wasn't ready. And when you break it down, most of these failures come back to six root causes. First, no data readiness. AI is only as good as the data behind it. And in most organizations, this data is still fragmented, inconsistent, or poorly governed. Second, solutions without problem. This is a big one, and you will see why when we talk about the four-step framework strategy that I'm going to share with you guys. Because this is when teams get excited about the tool, about the platform, they build a prototype, basically go for a fancy solution, and only later ask, what was the business problem we are trying to solve? Which is basically a flashy solution with no real business case. Third, no change management. Even a technically sound solution fails if people using it weren't involved, don't trust it, or they were never prepared to adopt it. Fourth, misaligned KPIs. Teams celebrate model accuracy while leadership is asking about revenue, efficiency, cost, or customer impact. If it performs well technically but creates no business value, guess what? It's still a failure. Fifth, no feedback loops. Models are deployed like they're finished products, but environments change, user behavior changes, and performance drifts if no one is monitoring or learning from them. And finally, sixth, skipping the maturity curve. A lot of organizations want to jump straight into AI without building a strong descriptive, diagnostic, or predictive capabilities. They are trying to build on a foundation that is not ready yet. So, yes, these look like six different problems, but really, they all point back to the same gap: a lack of data strategy, a lack of organizational readiness, and a lack of disciplined sequencing. Okay, so up to this point, we have looked about symptoms. We looked about failed project, mixed expectations, repeated patterns. But this is the real turning point because this is where we actually look at the problem. Most AI initiatives fail to deliver ROI not because organizations lack ambition, not because they lack access to the tools. They fail because they are trying to do too much, too fast, and without the sequencing to support this. When you have a lot of options, when you have the rush and you feel, yeah, I just want to get this, I just want to get on this AI wagon. I call this frozen yogurt syndrome. Think about it. Uh, have you guys been to one of those self-serve froyo shops where you go in and you're like, okay, I just want a vanilla small with a blueberry topping. That's it. But then you enter and you see the colors, the toppings, you have so many choices, the aromas, that suddenly what was supposed to be a fun experience becomes weirdly stressful. Yeah, give me a thumbs up or something if you've been in that situation, felt that before. Because you go in craving for something, then you get overwhelmed and you end up having something you might not have craved in the first place. That's frozen yogurt syndrome. And that's exactly what's happening with organizations right now. There's a lot of tools, a lot of dashboards, models, automation, AI capabilities, right? Forget organizations for a second. Chatbots. Let's talk about AI. We have GPT, we have Gemini, you have Claude. There's so many choices, so much that all of a sudden you are overwhelmed. And in organizations, when that happens, you don't get transformation, you get fragmentation, fatigue, and declining trust. So, this is not a technology problem, right? It's a strategy problem. Without a data strategy that accounts for organization readiness, change management, and adoption, teams end up building solution nobody ends up using. And that's the shift we want to make from this point on. The answer is no more tools. It's a smarter path, one grounded in readiness, sequencing, and real business needs. No more vendor hype. So, this is where maturity starts to matter. The critical insight here is not just the end state. It's not the, oh, I want to use AI. It's the, how can I use AI? Or where do I find a good opportunity to use AI? Because every organization wants to get AI driven decision making, automation, and AI driven optimization. But you cannot skip the foundation. You just cannot skip the fundamentals. And this is where I refer back to a Gartner case study that I found. It starts with descriptive analytics. What happened? That's your basic visibility. If you can't clearly see what's happening in your business, you are not ready for anything advanced. So you start with descriptive. Then comes diagnostic, where it talks about why did that happen? Why did the descriptive thing happen? And now you're moving from reporting to understanding. And you're not just seeing the numbers, you're interpreting the drivers behind them. After diagnostic comes predictive. What will happen? Now that we know what happened, why it happened, let's also predict what might happen. This is where you start using patterns in your data to anticipate outcomes, trends, and risks. And after that comes prescriptive. If these are the potential trends, what do we do now? Now the analytics are not just informing you, but they are helping you guide your action and decision making. And only then do you truly get AI driven capabilities, where now systems support autonomous optimization at scale. So the message here is simple: AI maturity is built, not bought. If the foundation is weak, the advanced capabilities will not hold. But if the sequencing is right, AI becomes a natural outcome of maturity, not a disconnected experiment, not a sidelined experiment, an outcome. And that's what we want to get to. Okay, we covered a lot. We talked about why AI is failing, what what are the potential root cause of it. But let's also shift our focus to what exactly works. This is the part of the framework, a four-step framework. Because for me, when I look at AI, I treat it as an outcome of maturity, not an entry point, right? In other words, don't start with the tool, start with the discipline. Start with the basics, starts with the fundamental. And this is the framework that I usually find myself going back to when I have to make a decision like this. Hey, first, What business problem are we solving? If we can't define the problem clearly, we shouldn't build anything yet. Second, what data, model, and processes do we need? Not what's flashy, what's trending, but what is actually required to solve the problem in the first question. Third is how will we measure success and scale? Because if success isn't defined upfront, teams end up celebrating activities instead of impact. And finally, the fourth one, how will we continuously learn and improve? Because no AI solution is ever really done. It has to be monitored, adapted, and improved over time. So these four questions are the shift. They move us away from AI as a hype towards AI as a disciplined business capability. And we'll go through each one of these individually. So, first one, first part of the framework. One thing that I do is I start with stakeholder discovery. Most important, highly underrated step. What business problem are we actually solving? Because this is where a lot of AI initiatives go off track. Because, like you saw, teams start with tools, the model, or platform, when really they should be starting with people and their pain points. So, the first thing I always recommend folks is stakeholder discovery. That means meeting directly with the people closest to the work, not just leadership, not just the technical team, but the actual stakeholder living with the process every day. Ask them what slows them down, ask them what frustrates them, ask them what takes hours for them to do that really should not, right? And one of my favorite question to get them to start talking is, if I had a magic wand, what would a perfect day look like for you? At work, obviously. And that opens floodgate, right? I love that question because it changes the energy in the room. People stop describing systems and start describing the friction. They tell you where the bottlenecks are. I remember I asked one of these questions to someone I met at a conference, and they were like, "Oh, if I could have, well, my ideal day would be if I could just open up my laptop on a Monday morning and understand, hey, this turnover came from XYZ, instead of me having to go to, 30 different emails for like 2 hours." I was like, great, that's my pain point. That's the real opportunity, right? They tell you where the work is repetitive, manual, or unclear, and that is where the real opportunities usually are. And you'll be shocked if you put that meeting on the books. Folks are definitely going to be interested for it, because if imagine this, if someone told me, hey, I want to make your life better, I just want to hear you vent, I'm 100% showing up for that conversation. I'm 100% showing up in a conversation where I can tell you my friction, my pain points. Because one thing you need to do is you need to hear these pain points not just across one, but all or multiple stakeholders. And then you start looking for patterns, and you'll be surprised to see how many of your stakeholders might actually have the similar pain points, because now you start aggregating those. Now you start looking for patterns. Now you start making them into project opportunities. This is where you are translating business pain into functional opportunities. You're identifying which problems connect you to revenue, which of these pain points affect cost, which one of these pain points affect retention, or which one of these create risk or inefficiency. And that's why the key lesson on this first part, step one, is start with folks. Start with people, start with your stakeholder. Because data strategy fundamentally is not about collecting a list of cool ideas. It's about creating alignment around the problem that are actually worth solving. Now, step two, the infrastructure reality check. Now that you have identified a real business problem, the next question that you want to ask is, what do we actually need to do to solve this? And this is where I encourage teams to slow down and ask a very simple question. What is the most efficient, simple, and reliable solution that I can build that meets the needs of my stakeholders in X amount of time? Right? Not every problem needs an AI solution. 9 out of 10 times, the answer is going to be automation, Excel, or Python script, right? It's a process fix. Very few times it's going to be genuinely AI. And this is why rights matter, because now you need to identify, is AI the right solution, right? If the problem truly requires pattern recognition, prediction, or intelligent decision support, then yes, that's the AI part. That's the right fit. That's the right use case you need to bring over. And before you build anything, let's say you identified this is going to be the use case where you need to use AI. Ask yourself, is the organization ready to support it? Do we have the right tools, the right infrastructure, the right data pipelines? Is the governance established? Are the business processes aligned? Because even the best solution will fail if the infrastructure around it is weak. And this is where a lot of teams get pulled off course. They get excited by what's possible and jump straight to a more advanced solution without understanding what are our current capabilities. So step back, do a quick check before you proceed. Then step three. This is where good ideas start coming together and they either drive real business value or fall apart. Because building something is not the same as it getting adopted by your stakeholders. For me, success is simple. Stakeholders can use it independently. It genuinely makes their life easier and solves the problem we said we are trying to solve. So this step is about building together and scaling only after validation. So first, build together. Share early milestones. Don't go waterfall on them, go agile. Don't disappear for 8 weeks. Build something in isolation and then show up at the demo hoping people will love it. That's how you lose trust. But with stakeholders, you got to build trust. Show them rough versions, get feedback, build the stakeholders with them, not just for them. Because when people are involved early, they help shape the solution. They can catch the blind spot sooner because they are in it, right? They are much more likely to trust and adopt the final output. Second, scale only after validation. Because just because something works in pilot doesn't mean it's ready to scale. Before you expand it, the stakeholders should clearly be able to say, yes, this solves my problem. This helps me save 30 minutes of my work day every day. That sentence matters. That's your return on investment. Because if the people close to the work, your stakeholder is still confused or frustrated, you are just scaling the problem. You are not solving it for them. And third, document. Document everything. Document the requirements, the assumptions, the decisions, the sign off. Document early on what success looks like. What happens if in case of a failure? Keep some buffer because a good document will protect you, your stakeholder, and eventually the project itself. And then finally, step four is about something that a lot of team underestimate, learning. Because here's the truth. No strategic project is ever truly done, right? We saw it with all the examples. We saw it with Zelo. Models drift, processes change, stakeholders change, business priorities shift. So if we treat launch as the finish line, we almost guarantee the solution will lose over time. That's why step four is not just about delivering an outcome, but it is about building a capability that can keep learning. Monitor regularly for it, right? The accuracy, the fairness, the adoption. Because something can be technically accurate and still fail if no one is using it, or if the business context has changed. Second one would be building feedback loops. Make it easier for the end users to tell you what's working and what's not, right? The feedback is not a nice to have, but it's an integral part of your system. Where one of the biggest lessons that we learn from Zelo is that AI without feedback loop degrades silently. It keeps running, people assume it's fine, and by the time problem become obvious, the cost is already high. And third, keep iterating intentionally. Not every issue needs a rebuild, right? When you get a feedback, identify where that feedback is coming from, what that feedback is telling you. You might not have to start from scratch. Sometimes it is just about adjusting a database or adjusting a quick UI feature, right? So the goal here in this step is moving from project thinking to product thinking. Not that we launched it, great, it was exciting, but we launched it and now we are continuously learning from it, improving it, and keeping it relevant and useful. That's what turns AI from a one time initiative into an actual living capability. So, that was a lot, right? And here's the real shift I want to leave you with. The path forward is moving from AI FOMO to AI that actually works. Because yes, the old ways were reactive. A new tool shows up, great, let's buy it. Teams go for the tool, they build something, they launch something. However, stakeholders still don't find the right solution. And that approach creates activity, not maturity. It creates experiments, not outcomes. This data strategy is different. It starts with the business problem. It assesses the readiness before building. It involves stakeholders from day one till day end, right? Remember, I didn't say last day. There is no last nth day. It defines success in terms of business outcome and not just technical performance. And it treats monitoring, iterations, and continuous improvement as a part of the work, not an afterthought. Because when the strategy is right, AI stops being hype. It becomes a capability that you can actually create and build value with. So I'll leave you with these. These are the four questions of how we cut through the AI hype and use it the right way. No matter what the industry, no matter what team, no matter use case. If we can answer these four questions clearly, the project will have direction, it will have clarity, support that it needs. That's the difference between chasing AI and actually operationalizing it. So, my hope is that next time AI comes up in any strategy discussion, a leadership meeting, a budgeting conversation, the question is no longer how fast can we adopt this? Instead, you can step in and ask the question, how? For what business problem? What do we have? Do we really need AI for this? How can I work with my stakeholder and then scale, build MVP and then scale? And how can I make sure this solution stays relevant, accurate, and accessible for my stakeholder? Thanks, everyone.
Wow. Like this is really spot on. I took a lot of screenshots without asking your permission. I was like, okay, this part I need to look at it again and be able to go back to it when I need to just remember the framework to have in mind. So there is a question already, and guys, you can also indicate with a raise of hand if you want to ask your question. But those who have put in the chat, I get to present their questions first. So, and Yungui, if you want to come off mute too, it makes it even richer, if you ask it in audio, by audio. So I'm going to read your question, and it says, can you share an example of how you applied this data strategy to build a successful AI feature? What challenges did you encounter and how did you address them?
Absolutely. That's an interesting question. And for legal purposes, I'm not allowed to disclose the feature, but I can tell you this framework that worked for someone else. I shared this framework, and my colleague, my then colleague, she was working in product domain. One of the things that she found challenging was she came back to me and she was like, "Hey, Nemo, this is great. But I had the first question when I was asking my stakeholders, what are your pain points?" And I asked them the magic one question, and they were still numb. They were like, "What do you mean?" Because she did not give them enough context. They gave her all the friction that they see in their day to day life, but she was not able to relate to it with product. So her challenge was letting her stakeholders know in what context she wants pain points. When I give the example of, hey, my stakeholder is spending 30 minutes just looking at turnover in those emails for like 2 hours every day, that's great. That's a data point for me. Someone spending X amount of time. I am a data analyst at heart, so that's a data pain point for me. But for her, it was product. So she had to give more context. She had to switch her language. So even though it's straightforward, you got to figure out what language resonates with your stakeholder. What's the language of your stakeholders? Even if it is English, what is the actual language? Is the data language? Is it the product language? Is it a pharmaceutical language? You got to learn that, and then you get them to answer these questions.
Yingui, are you still on the call? Did that address your questions? Do you have any follow-on, or you're clear with the answer? Okay, yeah, it's thumbs up. Any more questions? I think I have one. So
Yeah.
I sit in tech with the almost all the companies that I consult. I kind of sit more with the tech team, and I notice this pattern with those of us in the tech domain in companies. We think we know better tool-wise, and again, tech-wise too, than the stakeholders sometimes. That we, even though we don't say it to their face, we kind of, after the meeting, feel like, they do not understand the limitation of the approach they are using and the tools they are using, and they are too attached to the tool, and it's making us finding it difficult to we are not accepting whatever it is that they are saying is the best way they want us to deal with the problem because we feel there are better tools. And so my question would be, I think Steve Jobs once put it in a way that we like to say when we when we want to like make it sound fancy, we say, like if or is he, I don't know who said, maybe it was Ford who said, if you ask people what they wanted in the era of horses, maybe they will say a faster horse, but not a car, right? So the question that I want to bring out of it is, how do we sometimes, undo these fundamental differences between maybe like superiority of tools, of approach, that we just don't, and we can be correct, that the way forward is for them to stop using Excel for some things Excel was not built for, to stop using a tool that now there is superior in both capability and cost, and it's just them migrating, it's just the hindrance. How can we sometimes, handle those situations where the AI tool we want to build or the new solution that we want to give them is in all ways
Mm-hmm.
superior, but somehow the business, the team, the stakeholder is attached to one or two processes that they want you to keep in a particular way for them that will not work well with what you're building.
That's an interesting question. Yes, there has been a fundamental misalignment with tech teams and business teams. That is something that even I have seen, and everyone in tech or even in business would have seen that kind of friction. Here's the thing: tech usually moves at a higher pace than the business, right? Every time something new comes up, it does take a lot of time for business to adopt it. With tech, it's more like, hey, you know what? This thing came up. I tried it, worked for me, did not work for me. Two very different skill sets, two very different fundamentally folks. If yes, there is definitely value in letting them know, hey, don't use Excel for this. There's a better way. But one can only do that if there's trust between your stakeholders. Why should business team rely on the tech teams if they feel they are getting done fine? They are still hitting their targets, they are still hitting their KPIs, they are still meeting their goals. In fact, they are the ones who are actually getting revenue, while tech team traditionally was supporting them. So they are in the position of power here. So you need that trust. That's why in this particular one, you work with them in the data strategy. That's what I keep stressing to everyone. Work with them, not for them. You build that trust, and I've seen it real life. Once you build trust, your stakeholders will come to you and ask you, is there a better way for me to do this? Build that trust first and then have them come to you, not you go to them.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Anyone has any questions? We've got a few minutes more. Otherwise, I'm gonna just keep piling in questions. You can raise your hand if you also want to come off mute. Okay, maybe I'll sneak in one more. And this is more now for the tech itself. So I've also been in situations where, especially in a large organization, that every maybe three teams are meant to come together to build something. There's always going to be maybe governance team, there's going to be some team that maybe handle data, some other team that maybe they handle the actual product development itself from the tech side. And sometimes they might have preferences also too for approach tools, or how to even gauge that readiness, or how to go about doing a proof of concept, or just start getting something done. A team might want to just start right away and build something, that is like an MVP or a POC, and then begin to plug in the governance and some other things after. The governance group might be, no, 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 we have to first of all do some ritual, do some processes to set guardrails to say these are what's possible. And so the question is, for okay, someone's hand is up. So the question is, if we think about it as for the organization getting the max value, getting to be aware of all that is relevant and not just making uh, decisions based on what they think without actually really trying things out tech-wise, what would be the right approach within those large teams to be able to keep abreast of new tech and be able to be agile with also how they learn and how they do things better, almost as how logistics people and supply chain people do Six Sigma and like continuous improvement. How can they also, have put together let these teams work together in such a way
Right.
that it's much more leaning towards being faster and trying things out rather than just finding
Yeah.
roadblocks.
So what you're describing is how do we still stay aligned, even if with the broader group, right? If it's a smaller group, yes, you can work closely with your stakeholder. But when it's like three teams or multiple folks working with multiple stakeholders, you need a person or a team that that person or that team can have various names. I like to call them data product owners, where they speak both languages. They are, how do I say, they are friendly with both teams. They understand tech, they understand business. They can translate tech into business, they can translate business into tech. And they can keep these two teams aligned, where even if maybe these two teams not see eye to eye, or if there's many things happening just between the three technical teams, this person or this team will get alignment. Sure, X team wants to push out this phase. Y team wants to focus on XYZ product. This team or this person will keep them aligned, will pull them back and go like, no, 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 this is what the stakeholder wants. So this thing is solving their pain point. This is not. So we go back to this. That alignment is necessary with that one person or that one team, And they can have many names, right? Product managers, project managers if needed. It's a role, a hat that you wear in that position where you get both of these parties to get aligned.
Thanks. Daniel, you can come off mute. I see your hands up.
Hey, Michael, thank you so much. Hey, Miss
Mm.
Dilly. My question is, I'm working on a product called Microsoft Power Apps and Power Automation Flow. So Power Apps and Power Automate Flow is like kind of a low code and no code kind of an activity. So where we don't use most of our scripts like ASP.NET or JavaScript or something like Java application or PHP application. Right now, we always try to use most of the expressions like what we do in our logic apps or those kind of things. My question is, where do I start in terms of the AI? So which part of AI should I need to start? Because I was part of something called machine learning in terms of SSAS. SSAS is nothing but SQL Server Analytical Services, where we have written MDX and we have sort of kind of an touch base those what we call that algorithms like
Mm-hmm.
Navies Bayer or KKN or like things like logical regressions, all these things which are part of um, those AIs, right? So where should I start with? Because when I saw most of the AI, they go with either supervised or unsupervised kind of in learning, which I have already known in terms of in the past. But the thing is, where should I need to start from? Is my question.
So let me ask you this, and then I can answer your question. When
Mhm.
you say where can I start with? Let me ask you, where does your passion or where does your interest lie? Is it in, hey, I actually want to build models? Or is it more on the QA side where I want to be more in the human in loop, monitor accuracy? Or do you want to be involved in the strategy of how can I get AI to be used by my end stakeholders? Which of these three buckets would you say you'd find interest
Um,
in to start with?
I would like to go ahead with the automation process because the reason is I've been a kind of an ETL developer and those kind of a process for the last 16 to 18 years. I've been involved in most of the time with the data. So that's the reason I want to move on the automation part where I just wanted to do a lot of automation that will help my business to make the process more efficient, and not only that, that will help even us to understand where does the AI goes.
Mm,
And most of the times we involve as like since I was part of like a wealth management system, we involve certain things like KYC or AML. So you know that, right? Like how AML is more important in terms of the banks or like in terms of a wealth management. So I just wanted to focus on those areas with what do you call that, agentic AI or a generative AI kind of a thing. But I'm not sure where to start with. I can go ahead with LLM or like NPL or whatever it is, but I just wanted to ask you this question first, then move on to that area and make sure I still get at least a basic idea and stronger in that basic part, then move
mhm.
on to the rest of the things.
Yeah. A good idea would be starting and building an end-to-end, like you said, an application or an end-to-end agent, right? You can find a course on Udemy or LinkedIn, but find a course that's more hands-on, where it's actually showing you, hey, this is how you build it. This is how you would build an end-to-end solution. Because a lot of times these courses are more theory. While theory is interesting and it's necessary, it's relevant for us to understand the math behind it, you need to find a course that will give you that practical hands-on thing. I might have a few things. I can actually share those links with you, and
Sure.
end-to-end projects. Those are something that I use, but I'll definitely email you those.
Sure, you can put it on the chat. That would be helpful for everyone.
Okay, perfect. So let me find those, and if I'm not able to find them in time, Michael, I'll email them to you.
Okay, thanks. And I'm also putting your LinkedIn in the chat so people can also follow you to be in loop
Yes,
of knowledge sharing and other things you do.
absolutely. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out to me there, and we can continue this discussion there as well.
Sure.
Yes. Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
yes. And there's one more question. Francis. So Francis is touching on something that, is kind of a concern for, at least I know this is a concern in Nigeria because I moved from Nigeria about 3, 4 years ago, and I can relate with how there are additional constraints than what typically people face when they're implementing AI and tech solutions here. So I'll read this question verbatim as he has it. So, how can organizations in developing countries like Nigeria use AI in a way that fits their reality, given the poor data culture, limited data skills and systems, instead of just copying what works in developed countries? How can small businesses use AI in a practical and sustainable way? So that is his question. I'm gonna add the variant when you're done.
Absolutely. That's a super interesting question. So even in this case, right, yes, you don't have to copy what works in other countries, but here your stakeholder is just going to be different. And when I say stakeholders, the first thing that comes to mind is a business stakeholder, is a business person or something. But stakeholder can also be a school teacher, a professor. And one thing that I found useful is I connected with my college professor and he asked me the same thing. And he and I were brainstorming and we came up with the idea of a course where we can talk about AI ethics and governance and share that with kids early on. Now that AI is catching up, remember, we did not have AI for our assignments, but now folks do. What does that mean for kids? What does that mean for students? There has to be that ethical component. So don't think stakeholder is just the business stakeholder. Just see what's out there, see what's happening. That for me, in that moment, the stakeholder was my professor who was telling me, hey, I am concerned about folks not using this in a right way. So even if it is a small business, even if it is any space, ask yourself, what are some of the pain points someone is experiencing with AI? What are some of the pain points with school teachers? How can you help them to spread more awareness about AI to the next generation?
Great, thanks. And maybe the variant I'll bring up is because I sometimes get involved in conversations, and I think it's a version of what you said where people buy into the hype and they start the tool, they try to do the product before the problem, before they kind of identify the problem. But sometimes, people watch, they go to webby seminars, they go to conferences, and in conferences, these companies will show you a company that has your kind of problem. Maybe you're in manufacturing, but like, oh, you see, we've got from this
Mhm.
A manufacturing company, B manufacturing company, they've got this problem, and you could relate that, yeah, you to have that same problem, and they're like, this is the how they took our product and they implemented ABC, and now, this is the result they've been getting. And I think, because companies so understand, that once they can go from taking a problem that you can relate to and they putting their product as the integral part of the solution that gets you into to the what stakeholders can count as value, then it becomes tricky for that, the decision makers in that were there at that conferences, maybe the CEO, the CAO, the CIO, they begin to demand from the internal team, we want this, I've seen it happen, I have the same problem. So the variant on that question is much more common in developing countries because our CEOs, our head of leadership, they kind of attend these conferences, even if they don't go to all of them in person, they attend some virtually. And
Yep.
so they feel like, they have seen something that works, that addresses the problem that they have been mentioning, have been, raising about internally, and they now want the internal team to do exactly what they heard in those conferences. So I don't know if you have some interesting ways to kind of like say how people can handle those kind of situations, and so what would you say would be a way if you're the part of the internal team that you are being dumped on to implement a particular thing just because decision maker feels they've been sold on it. Either I think what's more common here is the consulting companies. They have a lot of influence on decision makers here. So that's the closest to that. So what would you say is a way to manage, or if you're not high enough to kind of tell them no outright, but how can one educate, I guess, and make them see that same problem doesn't necessarily mean, same solution.
Yeah, it's totally fine if you cannot go all the way up, right? And if your leadership has a new initiative, you cannot say no to it. I get that. The deal has been signed, stuff has been done. Now you're gonna sit and implement it. But here's something that you can. Number one, when you are on that initiative, you can make sure you're approaching it the right way. You're following the four strategy steps. And while you're doing that, first thing you got to lay out is to all your stakeholders, to your manager, to your team leaders, let them know that, hey, this AI initiative that's being dumped on, let's say on us, we are going to handle it strategically in this four ways, right? Because in that you're involved. You can take that ownership of this is how I want to structure it. So, yes, while you did not get to pick the pain point, you did not get to take the step one, you still have step two, three, and four the right way. And here's what you can do. Once people notice that you're trying to be more structured, you're trying to bring in more alignment, you get visibility. And that's when you pass that on to others. Because if something worked that you showed, others will catch on to that. So it's not just you not being able to make a change, but you are the change. You're driving it. Someone else will look at this and go like, oh, that actually worked for Michael. I'm going to continue that. Document that, and then with your team, with your manager, do an analysis, right, where you show them that, hey, this worked for me. How can we start operating this? How can we start standardizing this in our team? Take small steps at a time, right? You don't have to aim it one shot of, hey, I want to present it to the leadership. You got to bring value to the point. You got to start that, you got to be that change for that entire change to start. It's a slow process, yes, but it catches on. As soon as it starts delivering value, people notice, and that's how you make that change. You be that change.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know we've gone way ahead of time. I hope we have not stopped you from other things you have planned. It's just
No worries.
most of our sessions have been always lately have been more of tech and not so much of the strategy. So it's an opportunity to kind of squeeze as much as possible out. But thank you. I think maybe we can draw a close at this point. And I'm glad you've been able to pass the knowledge to us. And with these questions, I have seen ways I can apply what you've shared and put myself in context that is much closer to what I face, where I'm kind of brought in at later stage, and like you said, I just have to apply the parts that I can still apply in the framework. And to everybody that has asked questions, thank you. And those who have still to the end, I know that some people have to drop off, but people have asked if there is a recording. Yes, I've shared in the chat where you can access the recording. For this one, it will be like a day or two. And then I've also shared, you can give us your feedback. Let me just share again. It's not so much a feedback of the session itself. It's more about the entire webinar. If you don't like the timing that we put it, the platform we're using Microsoft Teams. It's going to be difficult to move. But, just share with us all of, it's just like a rating is a very quick way. Rate every aspect of the webinar, of the whole thing, and that will help us to know, what it is that we are doing right and what it is that we can try to find what will work for most people. But thank you very, very much, Nimo, for this amazing session. Like
Thank
it's,
you. Thank you so much,
yeah,
Michael, for having me and everyone.
I hope you are getting opportunities to keynote events. Like this is how I see people who do keynote do. Like it's just amazing. Like it's at a point I was like, are you using a teleprompter? But I know you're not using a teleprompter. Like, how are you so smooth and able to just like transition from point to point and, draw in scenarios from what's happening live in there and even the Q&A. So I think you are either put in the 10,000 hours that they say make someone an expert, or you're exceptional at this. And like I would say, this has been a great one. Thank you very, very much for honoring us with your presentation. And I know we'll have you in future.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. And Daniel, I still need some time to find those courses, but Michael, I will email those to you and you can send it over.
Okay, great. I will.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening and maybe day for those who are already, starting a new day. Bye and see you next month.
Bye. Thank you.